From Montana's news leader, this is the MTN 10 o'clock news.
Good evening and thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Russ Riesinger. The Senate holding a rare New Year's Day session to override a presidential veto. And soon a new Congress will begin, with lawmakers bracing for a series of challenges during next week's electoral vote counting. Those objections are expected to delay but not overturn congressional certification of President-elect Biden's win. CBS correspondent Jennifer Kuiper has more.
The bill on reconsideration is passed.
The U.S. Senate delivered the first successful override of President Trump's veto of the National Defense Bill. Earlier, Senate Republican leaders killed a final attempt for a vote on the House bill to give $2,000 stimulus checks to many Americans.
The House Democrats' bill is just simply not the right approach.
This is the last chance to deliver $2,000 before a new Congress is sworn in.
The new Congress convenes Sunday, and it will face its first test just 3 days later, with dozens of House Republicans and GOP Senator Josh Hawley expected to contest the counting of the electoral votes.
This is the only opportunity that I have to be heard and to speak up on behalf of my constituents.
The president praised Hawley on Twitter, saying America is proud of Josh and the many others who are joining him. Vice President Mike Pence will preside over the counting of the votes. Late Thursday, he and the Justice Department asked a Texas federal judge to throw out a case that would empower him to overturn the election results. Hours later, the judge did just that, dismissing the long-shot lawsuit brought by Texas GOP Congressman Louis Gohmert. Meanwhile, the clock is ticking down to Georgia's two crucial Senate runoff elections on January 5th. The outcome there will determine which party controls the U.S. Senate. The race pits Republican incumbents Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue against Democratic challengers Raphael Warnock and Jon Ossoff. Senator Perdue is currently in quarantine after coming into contact with someone who tested positive for COVID-19. On Monday, both President Trump and President-elect Joe Biden will hold rallies in Georgia to get out the vote for their party's candidates. Jennifer Kuiper, CBS News.
Well, both of Montana's senators voted to override President Trump on the defense bill. Democrat Jon Tester saying, quote, the president's recent move to undermine our national security, block pay for troops, and deny veterans their earned benefits was nothing more than a political stunt. And while Republican Steve Daines also voted yes on that override, he did not comment. Well, this coming Monday, the 2021 Montana legislature will be convening at the Capitol. And as MTN chief political reporter Mike Dennison tells us, this legislative session kicking off in the middle of a pandemic and with a new Republican governor will be like no other.
For starters, lawmakers and their staff must navigate how to run a session when many of the people involved for health reasons won't even be in the building, and keep it safe for those who are. Senate President Mark Blaisdell, a Republican from Kalispell, says arrangements are being made so members of the public and lawmakers who don't want to be in the Capitol can take part remotely. Limits will be placed on how many people can be in a committee room to testify on bills. But when it comes to some public health restrictions meant to slow the spread of COVID-19, majority Republicans are not imposing them. Legislators won't be required to wear masks at the Capitol, and it's not clear yet how people will socially distance in the sometimes crowded hallways.
My hope is that the Capitol run is kind of open as possible for those that want to participate. I think it'd be very difficult to try to administer a lot of different rules on that.
Minority Democrats say they'll be wearing masks in the Capitol, and that the lack of a comprehensive plan puts at risk those who work in the building and maybe others across the state.
And our concern is for communities all across the state that can be impacted by bad behavior at the Capitol. We need a clear plan that's safe.
Republicans have created a COVID-19 response panel composed of legislative leaders that will meet next week and discuss any plans. Yet, regardless of safety plans, the session gets underway next week, with Republicans holding big majorities and, for the first time in 16 years, a Republican governor, Greg Gianforte. When asked about priorities for the GOP majority, Blaisdell says they'll be focusing on Gianforte's Montana comeback plan to boost the economy. But this plan is 12 pages long with scores of proposals. So what specifically are we talking about? Blaisdell says an overarching theme will be changes that make it easier for businesses to operate. For example, acquiring environmental permits.
I think just adding a layer of predictability of, if you go in and you file this and you check these boxes, that this is the time frame that it should be done in for that process to move forward.
Gianforte himself says don't expect grand sweeping proposals, but rather incremental change to help improve Montanans' economic fortunes.
I think you win games with 3 to 5 yard plays. And we're going to run a set of plays here in this first legislative session that are directionally correct, that helps Montanans start to prosper again. And then we're going to huddle up, move the chains, and run some more plays.
Gianforte also has met personally with Democratic leaders who say they may share some goals with him and his fellow Republicans on providing needed services to Montanans. But Republicans have the majorities to move whatever they want, and Democrats may be left on the sideline, playing only the vocal objectors.
We hope that we can partner with them to deliver for communities, but we're going to be there to hold them accountable, to governing in a responsible way.
And as always, there's the unpredictability of every session, perhaps even more so in 2021, with the cloud of the pandemic still hanging over us. At MTN News, we'll be here reporting on how it all unfolds. At the Capitol, I'm Mike Dennison.
Well, Greg Gianforte will be sworn in as Montana's new governor Monday morning at 9 a.m. We'll be streaming that on Facebook and have coverage in our newscast. Well, 6 moms gave birth on New Year's Eve, but it wasn't until mid-afternoon that the first baby of 2021 was born here in Billings. Messias Kills on Top came into the world at 2:38 this afternoon at St. Vincent Healthcare. He was 20 inches, weighed 7 pounds, 13 ounces. He joins his siblings, ages 10, 9, 7, and 3. And with COVID, Messias has not had any visitors. His due date was January 5th, so today was kind of a nice surprise for the family.
We're just like, yeah, we made it to the new year. We're the first New Year baby. It's awesome. We were just thinking up names and it just came. Messias, thinking of Moses.
It's pretty special. I showed pictures to my kids of him, and they're pretty excited. Asked him what his name was, and you could hear them screaming around, like, I want to talk. And so they're all excited.
The Kills on Top family expects to leave the hospital tomorrow to return to Hardin. No word yet on the first baby born at Billings Clinic for the new year. All right, turning to meteorologist Ed McIntosh for a first look at the weather, and it may be 2021, Ed, but we're taking a look back at 2020 on the weather scene.
That's right. There was a lot that went on during the year, but take a look at the graphic. As you can see, anything that's in the white will show you where the temperatures were above or below the average for the month, and the red shows you where precipitation was above or below. And despite a lot of swings, we ended up at just over a half a degree warmer than average and just under a half an inch below the average as far as total precipitation went. So it averaged out pretty well, but we had a lot of days we were setting records. Billings, 9 days last year, we set record highs. Sheridan, 17 days of record highs, and Livingston, 15 days, and we had almost as many record lows. Most of those happened during the month of October when we saw that really cold and wet weather. Billings, 102 degrees was the warmest temperature last year, and 11 below the coldest reading. Look at the forecast coming up.
All right, thank you, Ed. Firefighters quickly put out a garage fire in Billings tonight. Several engines responded to that structure fire behind a home in the 600 block of Cook Avenue. Battalion Chief Jason Lyon says the call came in just after 6 and crews had that fire put out in less than 10 minutes. The fire did cause a power line to fall, and paramedics treated one man for minor problems from the smoke. The fire started outside the garage, and the deputy fire marshal is investigating. Starting today, Montanans over the age of 21 can now legally use marijuana at leisure after voters approved I-190 this November, but they can't legally buy or sell it. Now, this means our local law enforcement is making changes to the way they enforce the use of marijuana to adhere to the new law. MTN's Andrea Lutz talked to Billings police about the challenges.
Starting today, the use of marijuana recreationally is very much within the rights of Montanans under certain guidelines. But further guidance from the legislature is also still very much needed for police. As a new law rolls out letting Montanans use weed, area law enforcement still have many questions as to its impact.
Our concern is that there's going to be those consequences. There's going to be some type of impact on the community negatively.
But this concern is no surprise. Both Billings Police Chief Rich St. John and Yellowstone County Sheriff Mike Linder came out in October against the initiative, saying drugs are the main driver for property and violent crimes in Billings.
It wouldn't surprise us to see an increase in those numbers that have substance-related stuff.
But the voters have spoken, and supporters say this frees up police to focus on more serious crimes and brings in a new funding source for the state. But Lieutenant Brandon Woolley with BPD says there's still much to be determined with the measure.
And so we're waiting for the legislature to come out with more information on what is going to be a criminal offense versus a civil offense.
Until then, here's what BPD plans to do.
Marijuana will be legal to possess under 1 ounce and under, or 8 grams of some type of concentrate. And so our officers will no longer be, seizing those misdemeanor amounts.
Woolley says combating small marijuana crimes were never a high priority for the department anyway. He says smoking in public is not allowed and will be enforced, and you can't drive with it either. But
we still will be involved in, let's say if you got 4 or 5 pounds on you and you've got evidence of trafficking and distribution, we're still going to seize everything and we're still going to forward through for the county attorney's office with prosecution.
But here's something still to be determined: the use of drug dogs. Woolley says 2 of their drug dogs were never trained for marijuana detection. So it's going to be up to officers to make sure there's additional probable cause before deploying a search dog. In Billings, Andrea Lutz, MTN News.
Thanks, Andrea. Supporters say legalizing recreational marijuana will generate much-needed tax revenue. A study by the University of Montana's Bureau of Business and Economic Research estimated that recreational marijuana could generate more than $43 million a year for the state. Still to come on the MTN 10 o'clock news here on Q2, COVID's new strain continuing to spread across America, as the COVID-19 virus has already killed more than 347,000 people here. The latest on that coming up next. And one family giving new meaning to a long-distance move as they not only find a new home, but also hope and freedom right here in Montana.